Anyways, thanks for being here. I know we're in the final stretch. You know, when you're presenting some of the last couple of classes of the education sessions of the conference, the numbers start to dwindle. You know, after they handed out all the door prizes, I saw, you know, there was a mass exodus out the door. And so you can see who the dedicated people are that stick around for the conference. So I want to talk a little bit about, I want to talk about the FDA Reauthorization Act of 2017, specifically the May 2018 report that the FDA did and came out with. It's an interesting report. It's an interesting read. I'm not sure if I know Mike Powers has read it from front to back, and I don't know if anybody else has read through the report as well. But so the objectives, understand the 2017 Act, specifically Section 710. 710 covers medical devices. There are other sections of the report that cover different areas, but 710 is specifically for medical devices. So the May 2018 FDA report was covering quality, safety, and effectiveness of servicing, medical device servicing. We'll talk about the existing authorities. We'll look at the the 2016 request for comments, review data that happened or occurred or was captured during the public workshop, the summary of evidence, and what the key issues and the ongoing activities that are associated with the May 2018 report, as well as the FDA's report conclusion, what their conclusion was from the facts and information and data that was captured, gathered, and collected. I work for Intermountain Healthcare, the enterprise director, the leader of healthcare technology management. Just a little bit about Intermountain Healthcare. We have 33 hospitals across 7 states, about 4,700 licensed beds. It says 63,000 caregivers, but I believe that number's higher now. 385 clinics. From an HTM perspective, over 200,000 inventory devices, including that EKG machine that you see there. We actually acquired Salsa Health up in Idaho, and that EKG machine was in one of our clinics that's up there. So quite interesting. We have 180 HTM caregivers, but the picture there is, I don't know if anybody knows Herb Kramer, but Herb Kramer is our manager at our facility at St. Joe's in Denver, and that's a picture of him working on a piece of equipment just a couple of years ago. So, and then we also purchased Classic Air Medical as part of our life flight fleet. So we have 16 rotary wing aircraft, 12 fixed wing, and those are located throughout the country. Actually, we have quite a big fleet in Utah, as well as outlying locations in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. We've even got one in Puerto Rico as well. And our staff maintains and takes care of all the medical equipment that are on those aircraft. So an introduction to the FDA Reauthorization Act of 2017. It became law on August 18th of 2017. And again, Section 710 covers servicing of medical devices. And you know, the interesting thing is that when the act came out, what the FDA wanted and what they put in place was that it requires a report from a Secretary of Health and Human Services. So it wasn't something that, you know, that was put in place and they said, hey, we should take a look at this. It was a requirement that the FDA put in place. And what they said was, is we want you to take a look at quality, safety, and effectiveness of medical device servicing. It kind of blew up from there as they started that process. It got into some other areas, and as it moved into those other areas, the FDA came down and said, no, we need to redefine some things when it comes to medical device servicing. three key entities that they wanted to look at, or three key entities that are covered in the report, of course, are manufacturers or original equipment manufacturers. And you'll notice that remanufacturers are up there as well. So when they started taking a look at it, they said, what is the difference between servicing and what's the difference between remanufacturing? And they said remanufacturers actually fall under original equipment manufacturer definitions. So, and really, they're looking at if it significantly changes the performance, safety specifications, or intended use of the device, then it's a remanufacture. And they're under the same obligations and same requirements as manufacturers. Then you've got your healthcare establishments and hospital-based service providers, what we call our in-house programs. And you know, these are entities that actually provide care to patients. They employ healthcare technology management professionals, and they're subject to oversight from organizations like CMS, state governments, independent organizations such as the Joint Commission. You know, it's interesting when I talk to people and we talk about requirements, conditions of participation requirements for medical device servicing organizations underneath the hospital base, and you look at everybody says, oh, we're required to follow the Joint Commission. We're required to follow DNV. Well, no, you're not. You're required to follow CMS. Joint Commission, DNV, those organizations are accrediting organizations. They accredit facilities for CMS. So CMS is they're the big dog. And they take their direction. You'll see, I don't know if you've already seen, but there's documentation that's come out that Joint Commission is actually removing elements of performance associated with alternative equipment maintenance. So AEM programs, the EPs that are associated with those are being removed from Joint Commission in January of 2024. They're actually going to be in a guidance document at the end for Joint Commission, and the reason they're removing them, because those EPs that are associated with AEM are not part of CMS. They're not part of conditions of participation. So they become a guidance document, so you don't have to have an AEM program, but if you do, you follow these guidance under Joint Commission that mirrors CMS. And then, of course, third-party servicers and independent service organizations. So organizations such as TriMedics, Sodexo, Crawford, even GE. GE does HTM programs. They have a national agreement with HCA that they do. So that's looking at, you know, we're bringing these devices back to OEM safety, performance specifications, and intended use. If you got any questions at any time, just shout them out, mic right up, and we can stop and answer. And, you know, if you've never sat through a session before that's death by PowerPoint, this is it. Because there's a lot of data and information in that report and a lot of things to look at.
Supposed to put in slides of your fishing trip.
Right. So key definitions, again, from the FDA report, we talk about the difference between when we look at recondition, refurbish, and rebuild. So is recondition, refurbish, and rebuild remanufacturing? No, it's not, because it restores the device back to the OEM specification, so it's like it's new. So it's not remanufacturing, so it does fall underneath the servicing piece of the FDA report. And service, again, repair, preventative maintenance, but it's bringing it back or making sure that it meets OEM specifications. Again, FDA considers remanufacturing as a distinct activity from servicing. So it's remanufacturing is completely different from the servicing piece. And it raises different concerns. So the FDA considers refurbishing, reconditioning, rebuilding, repairing, and remarketing as service. Remanufacturing, manufacturer's requirements. More key definitions: repair, a type of servicing, remanufacture. Again, they are saying that these activities really significantly change the device performance. It's interesting in this. I was in a meeting, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago, and we were talking about this. We were talking about remanufacturing, and we had an FDA rep that was there, and they said, hospital-based organizations, they don't do remanufacturing. And I said, well, be careful in what you talk about. And they said, well, you have an example? And I said, only if you promise me you're not going to inspect my hospital tomorrow. Because we have our life flight operations that we do transport of infants and pediatric cases that are critical. I mean, very, very critical. And so we have an incubator that goes into the life flight helicopter, and you're talking about helicopters that are flying above 10,000 feet. So when you put that incubator in there, there's some things it's not equipped to operate at that altitude. So we've got a guy that goes in and he does some changes, and some gauges, and adds some valves and things so that the flight crew can look at it and make sure that it's functioning the way that it's supposed to be functioning, and they're getting the readings that they want to get. So is that remanufacturing? I mean, it's not changing the intended use, but it is impacting functionality. So are we a remanufacturer when it comes to that? Because I can tell you, when we buy new incubators, and the company we buy them from, as soon as we break into the case and start drilling holes and stuff, they're like, no more warranty. It's not ours. But,
aren't you only remanufacturer if you intend to sell
and that's another grade where they're looking at it, because it doesn't say resell it. All it says is if it changes the device's performance, safety specifications, or intended use.
But you only need that for a 510K for marketing the device, which is.
But if you're that device that you're remanufacturing has already gotten 510K approval.
Then it loses it when you remanufacture it, so you no longer have an FDA certified device. But if you like it, and you certify it to be sold, you would need to submit a new 510K.
Right.
But until you do, it's just an unapproved for sale device.
Right. Well, that's what we ended up having to do with that. We ran that all with a change through legal and risk and compliance, and we had the CEO of the healthcare system sign off saying we are willing to accept the risk because the outcome outweighs the risk.
The key was there was nothing available on the market to do.
Got it.
The other thing that I think might come into play is software upgrades, because you could change how the devices perform, because the new software gives it other features that it didn't used to have.
Well, and that's where, like with cybersecurity, cybersecurity comes into that mix as well as the software. So if you're that's why the FDA comes out. That's why the FDA has said anytime that there is a software revision, or if there's a patch, if there's a patch for a device, it has to be validated first before it can be applied, because they need to validate that it's not changing the function or intended use of the device.
Yeah, we do that in the laboratory. Validate.
Yep. Well, and we ran into an issue when WannaCry came out. Philips patient monitors were impacted big time by that. And when we checked with Philips, they said, we're working on it. Well, how soon is it going to be out? Well, it could be 90 days. You know what? We can't wait 90 days.
Well, they're working on the final.
Well, we couldn't wait 90 days. So what we did is we ran it up the chain, and we said, we're going to segment one system off. We're going to apply the patch, see what it does. And if it doesn't cause major problems, then the organization is willing to accept the risk to apply the patches to the rest of the system. And that's what we did. Remarket is transferring of a previously owned device from one party to another. And again, it can be through sale, donation, gift, or lease. Existing authorities and regulations, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act of 1938. That is the first time that it authorized the FDA to establish regulatory controls. It included medical devices. So there were amendments that were added in 1976. And that's where they designated medical devices class 1, class 2, and class 3. It surprised me that this, of course, if you look at 1976 now, you look back and go, oh, that was just, a couple of years ago. But, I would have thought it would have been done sooner than that. But anyways, as well as establishing radiation control provisions, pre-market approval, and also in that 1976 amendment, it covered proper services and saying that it is critical to ongoing safety and effectiveness of many devices. So this, based on these, this is where the FDA needs its authority to regulate device services. (1987) Compliance Policy Guide. Again, it covers reconditioners and rebuilders, as well as organizations making sure that they're subject to pre-market notification, labeling, good manufacturing practices, and reporting. And then following the Safe Medical Devices Act of 1990, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the FDA 1990. Following that, there was an amendment as well that it replaced quality assurance program with quality system requirements. As well as, if you look at it, it finds data associated with maintenance and repair, provides insight to device performance. And service data must be included by OEMs to monitor adequacy of design and manufacturing. Notice that it covers, and it says manufacturing. There's no requirements in there for hospital-based organizations, independent service organizations. It talks about manufacturers. Then the 1996 FDA rulemaking decisions. They exclude servicers and refurbishers from the final quality system regulation. And remanufacturers are included in the definition of manufacturers. That occurred in 1996. In 1997, they published a ruling on used device market, and that covers refurbishers, remarketers, really services that don't change a device. And really looking at the general controls, quality, labeling, things along those lines, as well as reporting recalls and device tracking. And then in 1998, the FDA came out and they revoked the 1990, the CPG 712428, which was the 1987 document that they came out with. And they revoked that one in 1998 because they said it overlaps too much with the 1996 amendment that came out. So existing authorities and regulations, the Electronic Product and Radiation Control Regulation, so EPRC. And that's where they issued, under the authority of the Radiation Control for Health and Safety Act of 1968, it includes devices that emit or would emit or does emit electronic product radiation. So it's not just imaging equipment, it's anything that would or does emit electronic product radiation. Some of the activities are considered servicing, and then you've got the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21. And remember when I said that the act, the act, the Reauthorization Act, and there are certain sections of what they cover. That's where you're seeing Section 800 medical device, section 900 mammography, section 1000 radiation emitting, and so on and so forth down through each one of the definitions and what they've got under each one of Title 21. I think the important thing to point out on these is, again, CFR 1020.30 is the OEMs are subject to disclosure of information on device performance standards. Very important to in-house servicing programs as well as independent servicing organizations. As well as 21 CFR 1020, which information disclosure around installation, adjustment, testing. Go ahead, Mike.
21 CFR 820 also spells out the requirements for environmental controls. So if you ever want someone to not use trunk stock and to develop a local warehouse for stocking parts, trunk stock violates 21 CFR environmental controls. So that's where you find the teeth of that to force your trunk stock.
Yeah, when you get into areas of extreme heat, extreme cold, things like that, you can't control that environment in the front of that car. So it could address the impact in parts or anything that are used in the repair and servicing of the equipment.
You know, I tell you a quick story. So I check oxygen concentration of oxygen at sea level on the Oregon coast. My next trip was in Cedar City, Utah, elevation about 6,000 feet. I could not calibrate my oxygen. The range was so far out of range, I could not get it to calibrate because I had gone from sea level to 6,000 feet. Gotta watch those things. The temperature in Utah.
And it impacts so many things. That's, we were making a trip from when we were living in Illinois, we were making a trip out to we were making a trip to Utah to take our daughter out of college. I had a Chevy Express van, and I was pulling a trailer in the car, and I got into Wyoming, and all of a sudden this thing just quit. And I pulled off the side of the road, and we were trying to get started. I ended up in an AutoZone parking lot and going through it. And I had some guy that stopped and was helping, and he said, after a couple hours, he said, "Does this have a tow haul switch on?" And I said, "Yeah, it's right on here." And he said, "Have you been using it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, Stop using it. It changes the air fuel mixture in the engine, and you're at a different altitude than you were in Illinois. And we stopped using it. They weren't perfect the rest of the way. It was all because of the altitude. But anyways, yeah, so very important 21 CFR when you start talking about performance standards, testing, adjustments, things along those lines. Medical device reporting regulation. And so you can see, as you look through this, the existing authorities and regulations, there's a bunch. There is a ton of them. The thing that the thing that we haven't seen on here is there anything out there about who can service, whether servicing organizations have to be registered or any of those things. And we haven't seen anything like that, right? So medical device reporting regulation requires manufacturers, device importers, and user facilities, and some distributors are required. OEMs are required to report serious or potential serious events associated with devices. Again, pointing out, OEMs. Does it say anything there about third-party service providers, independent service organizations? Malfunctions are reportable when they're likely to cause or contribute. User facilities. So here's user facilities required reporting. Hospitals, ASDs, nursing homes, outpatient treatment facilities required medical device reporting. And they're required to report, so user facilities are required to report to the FDA and the manufacturer, but only if it's determined that it did or could have caused serious injury or death. There's no obligation for user facilities or manufacturers to notify third parties. So if an OEM identifies a problem with a device that could have or did cause serious injury, there's no obligation for the manufacturer to report that to third party. So if an organization is using third-party service for that device, that third-party organization may not know about that incident or event. Challenges of medical device reporting and servicing. Most reports do not include who, when, how often, parts utilized, and what testing was completed. So if you're looking at user facilities or healthcare organizations, when they do a report that could have or did result in serious injury or death, none of that information is required to be included. As well as it lacks information, so the lack of information limits the ability to link the events to services. So this device caused this problem, resulted in this outcome. You can look through and gather all that data and information, but there's no link back to services. It's only that the device malfunctioned, and this was the result. Nowhere in there does it say this is who serviced it, this is the last time it was serviced, and these are the parts that were used. So FDA has not applied reporting requirements to third-party service providers. So now user facilities, manufacturers, third-party providers don't have to report that information to the FDA. So it really,
I have a question. Because I've been in situations where something should have been reported on third party. Yeah. So I go to management for that department and I say, look, this failed. We could have hurt someone. Is that reportable? Should they report that?
yes.
They should.
Yes.
And I tell them that. And they say, oh, I didn't discover it. You didn't. And I tell them, I'm not in a position to report. I just need to report it to you. And you need to make sure that the company is aware that this has failed. You know.
See, there's no requirement for the third-party service providers to report that to FDA. No requirement. No requirement for those third-party service providers to report it to the manufacturer.
But as a,
Is there a mechanism for them to report that?
Yes. Yeah, they can do the same thing that user facilities and everybody else do. They can use the MedSun reporting, or they can use that. But it is, so if there was an event that could have or did result in a serious injury or death, the hospital is required to report that. Required. There's no gray area, but the third-party service provider is not required to report it.
and we can't make them do it. That's the question I had. We can't play that game. It's their role. We can just inform them that this thing failed. You know, and put somebody who needs it. And an AED that should have taken care of being there, and it didn't. It just said cancel.
Yeah.
They did make manufacturer work. Because they sent it to the manufacturer.
And the user facility, when something like that happens, I mean, that's a negative outcome. And the user facility under compliance and risk should be reporting it. Yeah, I mean, it should be or has to be reported. So really that bottom line, when you're looking at the limitations of a passive surveillance system, and that's what it is. It's a passive surveillance system, and it really results in unreliable reports. So, and what I'm getting to on this is that if you read this report, or you know what, if you don't read this report, if you just go off of what's being stated out there in trade magazines, websites, or those types of things, you'll find that independent service organizations, hospital user facilities, third-party service organizations, they're saying, hey, the FDA did a study, and there's no way to independent service organization servicing and patient safety. And what you'll see in this report is that's not what it says. And it's related to unreliable reports and unreliable reporting. So again, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they are involved in regulation and maintenance of repair medical devices. Again, they are the authority under conditions of participation. Joint Commission again here are just accrediting organizations. I need to make sure that I'm not, because there's still information.
Each state is responsible for doing the inspections in the name of CMMC, right?
So, no, so Joint Commission, so if a hospital is Joint Commission accredited, then Joint Commission does the surveys to ensure that the facility is following the elements of performance that are related to the conditions of participation.
But in the dialysis center, the state.
So, and that's where it said before, there are other agencies that, so there are other agencies. So you got the Joint Commission, again, an accredited organization. Federal Trade Commission. And one of the statements the Federal Trade Commission says is that before you do anything, you need to make sure that what is the impact of competition or lack of competition. And then state regulations. You have state regulations as well. The state regulations can actually supersede conditions of participation. They do. Yeah. And the other thing to point out here is under state regulations, there are several states right now that are involved in right to repair. There is legislation in a number of states on right to repair. The problem is, it doesn't cover medical equipment. They cover farming equipment, iPhones, iPads, but medical equipment's not good. California just passed legislation. But if you read the California legislation, it doesn't specifically identify medical equipment. It's interpreted that it does, but it doesn't specifically say it. So get involved with your state organizations in that right to prepare to ensure that medical equipment is included in there. The more states that join that bandwagon, the better opportunity from a national perspective that'll end up with the regulations requiring or allowing other organizations to be able to service equipment. The March 2016 was a request for comments. I was a little bit disappointed as I went in there and looked. There were 186. So when the FDA Federal Register came out with a request for comments, 186 responses. Now, you got to remember, some of those responses were a health system that responded, or an independent service organization that responded, not just individuals. So they may have represented a number of people in those responses. And one of the things the healthcare establishments identified, there are 3 leading decision factors when it comes to servicing equipment: quality, cost, and time limits. Quality management system, the comments suggested standards for third parties that include ISO 9001 and ISO 13485. And the OEMs have said that lack of service records impact root cause troubleshooting device performance. Third party in HDO says lack of instructions and procedures impacts service quality. So not giving us the material information that we need to be able to effectively and service these devices. Training, also all stakeholders indicated that training is critical. OEMs are concerned that third-party service providers lack expertise and knowledge. But then you look at the third-party service providers' comments, and they said our expertise and knowledge matches or exceeds the OEM. Availability and use of quality parts. Again, there's no quality measurement system or ranking or registration for parts providers. You can have Joe's Garage down here providing parts, and there's no regulation for them to register or anything along those lines. So, and then access to specific service information. The the FDA did not confirm the validity of the allegations or investigative findings. So when they talk about safety, quality, and effectiveness, the FDA, again, they did not confirm the validity of the allegations of third-party service providers, user facilities, or OEMs. Then there was the October 26th public workshop where everybody came together in Washington, D.C. Some of the organizations that were represented: Peter Weems from MITA, David Anbari from Mobile Instrument Service Repair, Tara Federici. You've got some from ACCE. We'll point out Robert Kerwin from IMERS, very big advocate when it comes to medical device servicing. And then there were stakeholder and panel discussions, and again, some of the concerns: third-party service activities, no mandatory reporting, incomplete service histories, service by untrained, utilization of non-approved parts. And I think that's all I wanted to cover on that one. Now, the market competition impacts lower cost, improved access, and better service quality. Remember, the healthcare organizations identify 3 things that help them, what they look at when they're talking about servicing equipment, and it's timeliness, cost, and quality. And then April 2016, there's actually a presidential executive order that requires the government to promote competitive markets. Summary of evidence, again, number of service. This is interesting information to me because the number of service and repair entities, they don't have a precise number because it's not required for them to register or to be registered. So Dun & Bradstreet, with their codes that they've got, they estimated there's about 4,800 servicing companies, servicing firms in the country. But then they took a sample group and looked at an independent statistical analysis, and they believe that there's somewhere between 16,000 and 21,000 medical device service companies. Whatever precise number, because they're not required to register. So
that would include in-house or
you got that. In-house, independent service organization, third-party, OEM.
But your in-house don't have a they
Nope.
now.
But somewhere between 16 to 21,000 servicing firms out there. No quality evidence or no quantitative evidence to support an evaluation. ECRI took a look at a lot of their data and information, so FDA looked at that as well. Their MAUD database from 06 to 2015, over 2 million records. The alerts database, 528. ECRI confidential contracted accident investigations, 692. Only included capital devices that were focused on service, repair, and maintenance. So when they did a search on that and said anything that has service, repair, and maintenance in it, that's what we want to take a look at, and we're going to do a study on that. And the percentage of reports related to servicing was insignificant. 96 reports out of over 2 million were related to servicing. And I think that's like 0.004% is what it is. So not a bunch of them, but again, the question comes down to again is how reliable is the data? Because who's required to report? And when they do, what do they report? Medical device reports, several 100,000 medical device reports are received by the FDA each year. All reports since March of 1992 were evaluated. There were 4,300 that mentioned only third-party service. It included 40 deaths, 294 serious injuries, 3,791 malfunctions, 176 classified as other. And what I want to relate to or relay on this is that if you look, there were 3 deaths that were linked to services, directly to services. But there was a field service engineer on a CT scanner, field service engineer with an MRI unit, and there was a patient lift rail that was incorrectly installed that fell on a field service person. So 3 deaths, and they were all field service people, not patients. So the FDA determined no conclusive relationship between third-party servicers and adverse events. And again, what I want to make sure that everybody understands is that they're not saying, the FDA did not come out and say there is no issue. What they came out and said was there is no data, information, and factual information to support the allegation that there's an issue. Good.
So one of those 3 deaths was field engineer in Delaware, major manufacturer, who was installing a power meter on that MRI and had come in at 7 o'clock in the morning before they started cases, turned off the unit, and was installing the power meter. Lead tech came in, found her magnet off, and turned it on with him in there with a wrench on one of the plugs, one of the line feeds coming in. And he didn't open the breaker, didn't tag it out, nothing. He just turned the system off at the user control. And that was a manufacturer's route. I just happened to know because it was a hospital across town where I was out of it. But at least one of those I personally know who the guy was, and it was a manufacturer magnet, and it was not tagged out.
So the interesting thing is, here's the data and information that they reviewed, they evaluated, they looked at, regulatory misconduct reports or complaints with CDRH, and you can see that there were 29 reports of OEM service issues and 10 complaints of independent service organizations. So very limited. So some of the key issues and ongoing activities, and I know I'm running out of time here, but I want to cover real quick, and that is, I want to focus on those ongoing activities. So if you look at it, promote the adoption of QM principles by services. I think that is very important and is needed and required. And it's going to cause some angst with specifically probably independent service organizations, third-party service providers, and in-house programs. But you know what? We have to have it. And earlier I was talking and I said, you know, we base some of the standards of medical equipment. If you talk about the AAMIF EQ56, there's organizations out there, probably every one of them, if not every, close to if not every one of them that identify EQ56 in their policies and procedures, but I bet if you line them up at a road set, tell me what EQ56 is, they wouldn't be able to do it. But you talk to sterilization people or water quality people, and they reference the AAMIF standards, they can tell you. Again, clarifying the differences, they want to make sure that they clarify the differences between servicing and remanufacturing. So a significant portion of complaints and allegations pertain to remanufacturing, not service. And they talk about strengthening the cybersecurity practices associated with service. Again, very important. Servicing perspective and to keep the facility and the organization safe, cybersecurity practices need to be in place and they need to be strengthened. Foster evidence to develop, assess quality, safety, and effectiveness of services. So the FDA, their conclusion was that the evidence is not sufficient to conclude a public health concern. There's no justification for additional or different regulatory requirements. They don't want to be burdensome. They don't want to put so many regulations and requirements on the servicing industry that it becomes burdensome. They intend to follow the following actions: promote the adoption of quality management principles, and then CDRH commits to establishing collaborative communities. Very important. If you have not been on the MDSC website or on the MDSC LinkedIn or AAMI has MSC data and information on their phone, but it's a medical device servicing community. And it is, there are, I want to say there's like 45 members on it right now. That includes regulatory, manufacturers, independent service organizations, third-party service, in-house programs are all part of that community. If you want any more information about it, Mike Powers is an expert on it. There you go. Medical device servicing community. The initial meeting was in 2019 at AAMI. AAMI is the neutral convening organization. We have virtual meetings that are held every month. The charter was approved in July of 2020. There are shared documents on the AAMI website. There's the MDSC website and the LinkedIn page right there, if you want that. And then here's some of the current members. One of them that I want to point out and make sure everybody knows is the Ohio State University is on there. So, yeah, the Buckeyes are doing their part. Wolverine. Yeah, so a lot of organizations that are on there are represented. So if you have not been out there and looked at it, I will highly recommend you do that. So with that, any questions, answers, dad jokes, good stories about John Craig?